Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's your host Brian, and welcome back to another Q&A episode. Before we jump into the last day of the Nashville trip, as well as answer any questions, as well as jump into how to make a multi-drummer collaboration, as promised and as voted on by you, the people, let's start off with some news. So just three things to just kind of talk about a little bit. I've been giving it some thoughts, and I realize I haven't been doing a whole lot of the McGrib show recently. So what I decided to do, starting in March, not next week, but I think the following week, I'm going to start doing the McGrib show again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to morph the Q&A session into that. So this way I'm at least able to do, in a sense, two birds with one stone. So not next week, but the following week in March, I'm going to start doing the McGrib show again. If you guys do have any questions, I'll make sure to address it then. And if you guys do want to participate, just hit me up on the socials, and then we'll just go from there. Also, I am on Patreon right now, so it's only $2 to actually become a patron right now. What I'm going to do, in terms of my Patreon page, is cover travel vlogs, as well as any other extra questions that either you guys have, or either ones that I ask my interviewees, and I'll make sure to post it on there too. So, I got a link down in the description below. You guys can head on over. It's only $2 to become a patron today. I should also mention that after this one, because unfortunately I got my days a little mixed up. I thought I was on my Nashville trip a little bit longer, but after looking over the photos and everything too, I realized it was only about 4 days. So what's going to happen here is, in this Q&A, I'm going to cover the last day of the Nashville trip, which is only day 4. And then afterwards, the travel vlogs are just going to be strictly on the Patreon page. So if you guys want to see any more travel vlogs, head on over to the Patreon page and become a patron today. And lastly, I started reaching out to some of you guys in order to do some other collabs. And right now, I got one with John Brooks in the works. Gonna look forward to releasing that one soon. In terms of our drum covers, I did mention I want to get my High on Fire drum covers rolling too. So stay tuned for those ones. And eventually, we'll see if we get back into the Teenage Rebellion. And perhaps any other ones here and there. But my list is becoming a little extensive right now. So I'm going to try to see if I can knock these guys out as quick as possible. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let's jump to the last day of the Nashville trip. Alright, so the last day of the Nashville trip. We got a lot to cover on this one, but we start the day by getting on the hop-on, hop-off bus, and we work our way to the other side of Nashville, where we get off to Marathon Motorworks. Way back when, it used to be where they would make all their motor coaches or motor cars back in the day. But now it's been converted into like shops and kind of serves as like a little historical reminder of like how things used to be. And I mean, there were a lot of like tools and everything that my dad knew, so you can see what's going on, but it's like, geez, we really evolved afterwards. But the other thing that was really interesting was the American Pickers store was actually there. Now, we didn't see Mike or Frank there, but regardless, it was nonetheless amazing to actually go in and actually see the store for what they actually had on sale there too. So afterwards, we got on the bus and worked our way back in, even passing through what was actually a Nashville replica of the Parthenon, and we made our way to the Ryman Auditorium. Now, the history behind this is where everybody came in. Actually, the history was, it was meant to be a nice little place, a church gathering for, I think it was like Jehovah's Witnesses or other people with the religious faith. Regardless, it eventually evolved into what we now know today as the country music hotspot where people go in to perform. It's really where all the country music stars want to play. And me and my dad, we actually got up close to the stage and we got our picture taken. That's going to be a nice little thing to hang above the fireplace going forward. And they were getting ready for a show, so I forget who was performing that night, but regardless, we worked our way across the street, actually where they had more of a museum that kind of gave us more of the rundown of what goes on in the Ryman Auditorium, how it evolved into the Ryman Auditorium that it is today. That's where I also got my drumsticks. Man, that was totally awesome too. I think the other thing that was interesting, I got a picture of the side of the Ryman Auditorium, which worked its way down to Tootsie's, where I guess all the country music stars back in the day, namely like Willie Nelson, would just work their way down there to go grab a drink and come back and perform. So that was a little bit of an interesting story. Afterwards, we got on the hop on, hop off again, and we decided to go around, listen to the history all over again, kind of talking about the Civil War Battle of Franklin, as well as other things like Belmont University and other country music stars like Reba McEntire, and some funny stories here and there. Afterwards, we got off the hop-off bus, and then we worked our way back to Broadway. You walking across the bridge where we saw where the Tennessee Titans actually play. And then afterwards, we just went back to Broadway. And if you know how we did it the previous night, it was just doing that all over again. We bar hopped to various spots, even revisiting some bars. My dad, he was really fixated on trying to find people who were playing double bass, since they were playing more like bluegrass style. And I can honestly say, these last couple of nights have been the best that I've had in my life. In a good while, I should say. But regardless, Nashville, it was totally worth it. So we just sat down, had drinks, worked our way back to the hotel. Then the next day, we made our way back home. So for anyone who hasn't been to Nashville yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Get on out there and get ready to party and listen to some good old country music. All right, I got one question, and then we'll jump right into how to make a multi-drummer collaboration. So, our one question this week comes from my good friend, Rick Griffin. Rick, thank you again so much for being a part of the Eyes of the South multi-drummer collaboration. That means a lot to me, buddy. But Rick's question goes like this. What would be your dream kit and dream home studio? Something like Stamatis, or maybe just a shed? You know, I actually really had to think about this because I think a while back, on one of the earlier Q&A episodes, I think I did say like how I wanted my set to be symmetrical in a sort of way. But that's actually changed because recently I actually went to a store in my neck of the woods, and I actually saw this hybrid kit staying there. And it was a Roland brand. It was an arm and leg to get because it was like $8,000, and that's probably not even including tax or anything like that. But I think thinking on it then, and even after some of the interviews I had that kind of talked about hybrid sets, I feel like having a hybrid set would be something ideal for me going forward. Now I think when I was at the store, I think one of the guys told me that they were doing a sort of hybrid that would sound acoustic, but then like all you do then was just like flip a switch and that would make it like electric per se. I don't know when that was coming out, and I believe it was DW who was actually making something like that. So there's no price tag on it yet. There's no sort of release date on like when they're going to do it. So it's up in the air at the moment, but I think in terms of drum sets, I think a hybrid kit would be something I would eye up going forward. Now, in terms of the studio, I really thought about this too. And I do like this room in general, but I think eventually when I get my own place, it would definitely be in the man cave. So I don't want to kind of like just give you guys any false impressions yet, but I feel like if I really wanted to, it'd be like one section in the man cave would be just where the drum set is. Another one would be right where I do podcasting and all that stuff. I think I would like to include video games at some point, but right now, the way my schedule is, it is a little hectic. So I think when I eventually do like find my own place, I would like to just like get a view of like how the man cave is and then just lay it out right then and there. So unfortunately, Rick, I can't answer that much yet, but that would be at least a nice little blueprint I would like to do. So that's the best I could give you, Rick. So sorry I can't answer that part, but I'm at least happy I was able to answer your first question. All right, and as promised, let's jump right into how to do a multi-drummer collaboration. All right, so here we are in Final Cut Pro, and this one I'm actually going to use Rick Griffin's audio that I used for Eyes of the South, along with the audio from that. So the biggest rule when it comes to doing any sort of multi-drummer collaboration is make sure everybody is using the same track. Now, I've made this mistake before, and it happened to me twice. And if you also want another example, look at my Glory Days collaborations I did. There's take one, which was a complete mess, and I kind of wish I consulted you guys first, so that was my fault right there. But then the second one is a whole lot better. So, as I said, number one, make sure everybody's playing to the same track. So, in terms of number two, when we're looking at the audio here, what you're going to want to do is try to line it all up. So, if you're using Final Cut Pro like what I am, you want to create two separate projects. So one's going to be where you're going to make sure all the audio matches, and then the second one's going to be where you put it all together. All right, so as an example right here, we're using Rick's, and we're just going to say like this right here is going to be the snare hits. Then this over here is where Rick's snare is going to hit up. So you notice that it's way far ahead. For whatever reason it is, maybe it's because of FPS or anything like that. Sometimes that tends to happen because sometimes I like to shoot in 1080p at 30 frames per second. A lot of you guys, I know you like to shoot at 1080 at 60 per second, so I think that kind of creates a little bit of somewhat of a break right there. But regardless, if we're saying that this is a snare hit right here, we're going to make sure we try to line up Rick's audio with it. So, since it's ahead, what we're going to do then, we're actually going to use the blade tool, or Command B. It's going to do that, and then all you want to do then is drag it to at least matches, at least close to about right there. If you want to do it that way, or if you want to do it this way, just make sure like it lines up with like where the cursor is right here. And then that should match it all up for you right then and there. Now, when it comes to Final Cut Pro users, you want to make sure that you're in this gray box. And because I've kind of run into this issue too, where if you do use the blade tool, it's going to separate the audio and kind of create a little bit of a dark space in between. So for Final Cut Pro users, make sure you're in this gray box. Now, that's for if the notes are ahead of our audio, for instance. If they're behind, in this case, we're going to look at this one right here. If it's behind for whatever reason, you're going to actually want to put in a freeze frame instead to kind of bump it ahead and then adjust it so that it lines up with your audio. So normally I like to use the help function in order to find the freeze frame. Make sure it's highlighted and make sure your cursor's in the right spot. So once it does that, it's going to create pretty much, it's going to do exactly as it does. It freezes it, that sort of frame for you. And then all you got to do is just adjust, which is going to say it's that one right there. I know it's probably a little ahead, but regardless. I'm going to adjust and try to get it as close as you can. It might not line up perfectly with it, but try to get it as close as you can. Now what this is going to do is, if you really pay attention, because you're really going to try to shrink this down to as small as possible. But if you do listen real closely, you'll notice that there's a brief pause in, if you're listening to like Rick's audio and him playing, you're going to notice there's going to be a brief pause. So that means that's the freeze frame right there, just making sure the audio lines up and everything too. But that's really about it. And what you're going to have to do is you have to go through the entire audio right here and just make sure that everything lines up. If it doesn't, you either use blade or you use a freeze frame. And then eventually, once you get it down to the end, everything sounds good. Maybe you listen to it a couple times. Then you can copy and then paste it into your final project. Make sure that it all lines up. And then you're good to go. Now, depending on the size, this one, it was only me, Michael Jade, and Rick Griffin. So it wasn't too bad. But for like the real bigger ones, like 9 drummers and up, it does get a little bit tricky then, especially if you're new to it too. So I'd recommend, if you're new to this, start off with like maybe a basic song, similar to like Seven Nation Army or even some Queen songs, No One Bites the Dust, for instance. Start off simple and then work your way up to. Then once you start getting experience, then you can also try to expand out to maybe more complex songs. Now some drummers, they like to also improvise a little bit, and if you're okay with that, you're okay with that. If not, just tell them like, hey, can you just try to play it note for note? Or at least as close to the song as you possibly can. So there's my advice. So I really hope this helps you guys out. So here's how I do a multi-drummer collaboration, and there's my blueprint for you guys going forward. All right, and that wraps up another Q&A episode. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you leave a like and a comment below, and consider subscribing so you can show your support, help my channel grow. If you guys want to show up on my podcast, All Music Matters and That, my Grip Show, or my Just Chatting series, just hit me up on the socials. I got links down in the description below. Look forward to chatting with you guys. If you guys have any other questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments, and I'll make sure to address them in the next Q&A episode. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Stay safe. Stay tuned, y'all.